Let's go over some simple anatomy of the heart. So when we look at the heart, the first thing that we need to understand about the heart is that if we look inside, it is separated into 4 chambers. We have the receiving chambers called the atria. We have a right atria here and a left atria here. And then we have the ventricles, which are the pumping chambers. So again, we have a right ventricle and left ventricle. So the right side of the heart is going to be receiving deoxygenated blood from the body tissues. So this massive vein here called the superior vena cava and this massive vein here called the inferior vena cava, in addition to the structure called the coronary sinus, are going to dump deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. From the right atrium, that deoxygenated blood is going to pass into the right ventricle. You will see that there is this valve here called the tricuspid valve that is important in preventing backflow from the right ventricle back into the right atria, because we want to make sure that blood is flowing in the correct direction. From the right ventricle, that deoxygenated blood needs to become oxygenated. So where does the right ventricle pump that blood? Well, it needs to pump it to the lungs, because that's where that blood can become oxygenated. So in order to get to the lungs, the right ventricle has to pump or push that blood into this massive vessel. We see this valve called the pulmonary valve, which leads into this massive vessel called the pulmonary trunk. This pulmonary trunk is going to divide into the right and left pulmonary arteries, okay, which carry deoxygenated blood to the right and left lungs respectively. Once that blood gets to the lungs, it becomes oxygenated in that external respiration process. And then that oxygenated blood needs to get back to the heart. So what structures are going to carry oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart? Well, these 4 structures called the pulmonary veins. Veins are always going to carry blood towards the heart. So the pulmonary veins in this case are carrying oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. The pulmonary veins dump that oxygenated blood into the left atrium. From the left atrium, that oxygenated blood passes to the left ventricle. We see another valve here on this side. This is called the mitral or bicuspid valve. That's going to prevent backflow from the left ventricle back to the left atrium, because we do not want that. So once that oxygenated blood reaches the left ventricle needs to pump that blood to the entire body, to the entire system, so that all our body tissues can get oxygenated blood. So how does it get that oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the entire body? Well, again, it needs to pump it into this massive vessel. We see this valve called the aortic valve or aortic semilunar valve, because it leads into this massive artery, the biggest artery in our body, called the aorta. The aorta is going to carry that oxygenated blood, and all the branches off the aorta, we call our arteries, it's going to carry oxygenated blood to all of our body organs and body tissues. Eventually, once that oxygenated blood reaches our body tissues, it exchanges that oxygen, it gives oxygen, nutrients, picks up waste products, and that blood becomes deoxygenated and then has to return to the heart, and we start over this cardiac cycle.